It began when Wingfield lost both his wife and his child in childbirth. As was custom of that era, his wife was buried in the cemetery, and his child was to be buried in the wilds beyond the boundaries of the village. An unnamed child buried beneath an unmarked stone. So Wingfield traveled a full day and night from the village to lay his deceased infant to rest. When the grave was dug and the infant buried, Wingfield placed the stone and said his final words for the child that never was. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world. We loved you more than anything. I wish we could have spent time together. I wish you could have listened to your mother sing. I wish I could have found your favorite food. I wish you could have told your story. I wish the fates were kinder. Just know that even in death, you were loved, my baby, he said to the stone as he stood to prepare for his journey back home. As he traveled, he heard the cries of a baby. Wondering if the baby was in danger, he sought out the source and found a small bundle balanced on top of a large flat stone. He picked up the infant, and as he did, the baby stopped crying. What happened next is unclear. Some say he called out for the infant's parents repeatedly, but there was no response. Others say he simply clutched the infant to his chest as he quickly made his way back to the village, hoping to avoid the parents. But if you ask your dearest friend, they will tell you. Wingfield was prepared to call out for the infant's parents, but then the baby grabbed his finger with her tiny hand, and then he gazed into her eyes that were so large, so soft, that gazed at him with all the love of a dream. Wingfield silenced himself and now carried a new weight with him back to the village. Regardless of what tale you tell, believe, or were told, what is agreed upon is that Wingfield brought back the infant, praising the fates for their kindness in bringing an orphaned infant to a widower. Still, Wingfield and the villagers would soon learn about the difficulties of raising a child from the wilds. The first difficulty Wingfield found with his new adopted child was actually trying to feed her on his journey back. Despite being the size of a newborn, the infant had a full head of teeth, and the infant didn't cry when she was hungry. Instead, she gnashed her teeth, like a wolf wanting to chew on a bone. The infant didn't drink water when offered, instead choosing to choke on any fluid that passed its lip, except for the Hibernian beer that Wingfield carried with him. Wingfield tried feeding the infant nuts, berries, and jerky. Any plants he tried to feed her turned to rot and dust as soon as they passed the infant's lips. The decay spat out to sizzle on the ground. Any salted food that touched her flesh caused her flesh to bubble and burn where it touched. And he struggled to find out what to feed her. He got his answer when they passed a dead and decaying squirrel. He saw her reach for the carcass, and he had an idea. Not wanting to feed her such an old carcass, he instead captured a fresh squirrel for her and gave her the squirrel while it was still alive. The eager infant devoured the creature with ease, chewing fur, flesh, bone, blood, and organs with ease. As within minutes she finished her meal, leaving blood over both herself and her clothes that Wingfield had to clean in the stream. The next difficulty he had to deal with was his child's cries. She rarely cried, but when she did, all of the wilds turned silent. The bugs, the birds, the breeze, even the fire all silenced when she cried. The world was silent except for her cries, and he learned quickly to get her to stop crying for fear that her cries would erase the sounds of encroaching danger. The child also never slept once during the long journey home, remaining awake and aware in Wingfield's arms. Even when he slept with her in his arms, she remained awake, her wide, wise eyes watching him sleep. And then there was the difficulty she had with both fire and the sun. During the day, she would keep her eyes closed unless they were shaded, and at night she would never stare directly into the fire. As far as Wingfield could tell, her eyes were suited for the darkness, and her eyes were too sensitive for both the sun and fire. Still, Wingfield was happy to carry the strange child back to his village. Just outside of the village, 3 women greeted him. The midwife, Nona, the cartographer, Thesis, and the undertaker, Morrigan. The women were matriarchs of their own massive families, the first of their guilds, and distant cousins to each other. They had never been together before, nor since, but they came to meet Wingfield on his journey back. They crowded around him and his infant. "You left with a dead child and returned with a living child. Usually it goes the other way," Morrigan spoke first, her hands like the claws of a raven, her nails scraping the child's flesh, but leaving no mark on the child's skin. The infant stared into the Morrigan's eyes with no fear, even when the father averted his eyes from the terrible women, fearing their judgment and evaluation more than he feared death. Still, the infant had no fear, even when the Morrigan lifted the child higher than Wingfield could reach. "A strange father for a stranger child," Morrigan said as she opened the child's hands to examine the lines inside. Seeing that the child had no lines at all, not on her palms, not on her fingers, even the prints that would be on a hand were gone, leaving only smooth skin behind. "I cannot cut a thread that I cannot see," Morrigan said as she produced golden scissors from a place of darkness as she raised it up to the child's head. "Please take me instead. I cannot lose another," Wingfield begged Morrigan, who didn't bother to even glance at the man. "I believe you made a similar request of a cousin of mine. You mistake him for a merciful man, and you mistake me as a merciful woman," she said as she grabbed a lock of the infant's hair to cut with her scissors. Wingfield screamed when he saw the Morrigan scissors close. Except her hair did not cut. The scissors closed, but did not cut. Even when she tried again and again, nothing cut the child's hair. "This child's end cannot be dictated by me. Can you tell me, dear cousin, the life she will live?" Morrigan said as she handed the infant to Thesis. Thesis examined the child closely, looking at her eyes, her feet, and even laid her head against the child's chest to listen to her heart. After a few moments, the mute cartographer shook her head. She knew nothing of the life that the child would live. She didn't know if it would be tragic or romantic, heroic or villainous, dark or light, wise or foolish. She didn't even know if it would be synthesis, thesis, or antithesis. The child in her arms might as well be free of destiny. If Thesis wasn't looking directly at the child, she would have thought it impossible. So instead, she handed the infant to Nona, who examined the child. "What can you tell us about the child?" Morgan asked Nona, who examined the child closely, examining the child's teeth and then her clothes before Nona gave her assessment. "Mother," Nona whispered as Morgan turned to face Wingfield, translating for Nona. "The child has a mother who is looking for her. You'd be wise to give the infant back as soon as the mother arrives," Morgan told her. Don't you mean if she finds me? Wingfield asked. No, Nona responded with the finality of a guillotine. The mother knows where she is. She knows where you are. She is on her way here. You are fortunate you have time to say goodbye to your new child. Most don't, Morgan translated. She's my child. You cannot take her from me, Wingfield cried as Nona crouched down to hand the child to Wingfield. Mistaken, she whispered to Wingfield, who clutched the child close to his chest, while he stared at the old woman, wondering why they would possibly hand the infant back to him. She was never your child. She isn't your child. She will never be your child. And we do have the power to take her from you. We could stop your heart, brand your flesh, consume your liver, hang you with our threads, feed you to spiders, or simply cut your thread. We could also leave you alive, stealing the child from your arms before you ever know she existed. We could leave you broken at your baby's grave, deaf to the infant's cries. There are many ways we have power over you, and we could stop you. You know this. You've seen us twist mortals and gods alike. So consider, Wingfield, why we would ask you to do the right thing, and not simply change your story, Morgan translated for Nona. He kept the infant close to his chest, and in his heart he knew the answer. Choice, Nona whispered again. It was a choice. It was always a choice. If he never heard the infant's cries, if he never knew she existed, if his heart simply stopped, if she was ripped away from him, he wouldn't have the chance to do the right thing. Forcing everyone to do what was right wasn't the way of the fates. They wove the threads, but everyone made their own choices. Heroes were heroes by choosing to be heroic. Villains were villains by choosing to be villainous. Removing choice made people pawns, not players. Thank you, ladies, for letting me choose, he said as he continued his way to the village. Mercy? Nona asked incredulously. Theseus raised an eyebrow, and she smiled. You still think of us as merciful. Oh, little pup, if we were merciful, we wouldn't give you a choice, Morgan cackled as Wingfield made his way into the village to show everyone his new child. That night, once the questions faded and everyone were in their homes, the night watch called out that a stranger was coming into the village from the wilds. People left their homes to watch the stranger, and when they saw the stranger, they all stopped in fear of what they saw. The mother was taller than any of the men in the village, a head taller than the houses. Her cloak was made from feathers of gold and silver, shimmering beneath the starlight. The knife she carried on her hip had a blade of obsidian and a handle covered in rose thorns that would just as easily pierce with the handle as it did with the blade. Her hands were scarred and cut deeply. Even as she walked, her hands dripped golden ichor, causing flowers to grow everywhere it felt. She walked barefoot, but made no noise where she stepped, and left no footsteps in the soil, leaving only light bruising on the dead leaves. Her teeth shone like stars, and her eyes were as amber as honey and gold, shone even in the deepest darkness. Her face may have been called fair, but it was a beauty that living women did not possess. It was beautiful beyond imagination, and terrifying as she stepped into the village, with no emotion that the villagers could recognize. Most who saw her face felt compelled to tear at their own faces, looking upon her made themselves feel like they were the ones who were wrong, the ones who were twisted beyond recognition, and who had to be beaten, broken, and battered into perfection. Many fell that night, and few were strong enough to leave their faces untouched. When the villagers tried speaking to her, she ignored them. When a man tried to bar her way, she kept walking without hesitation, her strength pushing him aside like he wasn't there, leaving the man bruised, bleeding, burned, and blinded from where he touched her skin. The woman continued walking until she made it to the house where Wingfield slept. When there, she knocked once on the door. When Wingfield did not answer, her next knock knocked the door off its hinges, and the mother ducked to enter the home, where she could see Wingfield cowering in a corner, holding the infant in his arms. She glanced at him, and she spoke in an ancient tongue that he could never understand, a language that caused both the timber and stone of his home to shake, something that made it clear that if she willed it, that she could have knocked down the entire village with a single word. She pointed at the infant, and Wingfield could see familiarity in the infant's eyes. This strange being was the baby's mother, and she wanted her back. He clutched the infant close for an instant, and he saw an emotion he could recognize in the mother's strange glowing eyes. Love. She loved her infant, and she didn't want to let her baby go. She could have harmed him to get to her, but Wingfield figured she feared harming her baby. Still, he looked at the baby one last time before he sighed, and he lifted the infant up for the mother to take. She gently took the infant from him, her skin warm and gently healed where she touched him, as she held the infant close to her heart, examining the baby's face before lowering her dress to feed her baby. Wingfield noticed that her milk appeared as golden as her blood. The mother smiled, not with her teeth nor her eyes, but she smiled as she turned to take the baby with her. In that moment, Wingfield only felt betrayed. He lost his wife, he lost his first child, and then it felt like the fates handed him a child that he could love and care for, only to have that child taken away. As Wingfield glanced at his knife, he only had one thought. He couldn't prevent the loss of his wife or daughter, but he could prevent this loss. He thought as he grabbed the knife and threw it at the woman as she stepped outside of his house. The knife landed between her shoulders. A ragged pop was heard as the woman fell forward on both knees, curling her body around the bundle in her arms, trying to keep her safe even as her death rattle left her lips. A death rattle that was the most human thing about this strange woman, and the nursing infant still suckling at her chest. He decided that the infant was his and his alone. It didn't matter to him that she had a mother or that she wasn't his kind. He loved her too much to let her go. A love like how a wolf loves a lamb. A love like how greed loves gold. A love like how a child loves a toy. Something to possess, something to own, something to consume. But as the man held this child close, covered in her mother's golden blood, he only thought how lovely it was to have a child again. He did not care about her future, nor his village's. All he cared was that he held a child in his arms, and he didn't care how her mother's blood and milk mingled on his hands while he clutched her.